Good evening and welcome to Conversation Matters. I'd like to welcome Catherine White and first of all give you a little bit of an introduction as to how Catherine and I met. This goes back quite a while actually to, if you like, before COVID, and follows my introduction to the deaf community. I feel embarrassed and ashamed to say I knew little about communicating with somebody who was deaf. And my learning was steep, absolutely steep, because I had no idea how best to communicate, how to do with anything without causing offence. In another introduction, I'll go back and expand on that a little bit more. But Catherine opened my eyes very much to how the Coda story began. And we met different people throughout the journey of, I think it was 7 interviews, Catherine. And what we'll be doing is putting them all out for everybody to follow that journey. And it's a journey through generations of how Coda International started. And maybe what we'll do, Catherine, is kick off first of all with, because there will be people like me who are totally, I use the word lightly, ignorant, not intentionally, but unaware of what Coda stands for and Coda International. So maybe that might be a good starting point.
Okay, so the word Coda stands for Children of Deaf Adults. And in my case, both my parents are deaf, both now deceased. I also had an aunt, uncle, 5 first cousins and 2 second cousins that are all deaf. I would have called myself, and I still do, the minority within the minority. And that is, you know, it was different because I'm in the southwest of Ireland, a town called Tralee, and we were one of the very few families that had that many deaf people in the family way back then. In terms of Coda International, I first became aware of it at the World Federation of the Deaf Conference in Finland in 1987. So you talked about your learning was steep. I would call it my coming out as a Coda happened at that conference because there was a lady by the name of Millie Brother. She founded Coda International. And I remember sitting there and she was talking about having deaf parents. Now, prior to that, there was never a public coming out of, I am the child of deaf parents. It was always like, oh, you've got deaf parents, but it was always on what I would call the down low. And here was this beautiful blonde looking woman with gorgeous teeth, you know, the softboard look, California, and she's standing up in front of the world saying, I have deaf parents. And I remember sitting there mesmerized by this woman. And something that she had said resonated with me. And I had actually gone into that meeting not knowing anything. And I came out of that meeting completely changed, completely.
Suddenly realizing that it was okay that there were people living full lives and being accepted with being deaf.
Yeah. And it was said positively. It was embracing sign language. It was embracing parents. It was embracing the way that we had lived. Because prior to that, there was no conversation about it. There was never made any mention of it. There was no research done. There was no role models. There was none of that until that point. And when I came back to London and I started telling other people that had deaf parents, did you know we had an, it was very simplistic. There was nothing fancy about what I was saying, but it was just saying, did you know that we had a name? Did you know that there's other people like us? Did you know that they've done a book about this? Did you know that they have done research? And everything that they're saying and everything that they're doing is the same as us. Didn't matter if you're Irish, didn't matter if you're American. You know, there was one story that was told about a Coda in Texas. Again, mesmerized that this wasn't just my experience, but it was an experience that was being shared by other people out there in the world that I didn't know about.
I mean, in some ways, we really are an island community, and within that community, people, you know, as you said, within your family, as a hearing person, you are in the minority, but quite often, even within Ireland, we have hidden, what I would call hidden communities.
Yeah.
And if you look, you went to that conference in what you said, 1980,
1987.
and it has taken until 2017, was it, for the ISL Act?
To become legally recognized, yeah.
And so just touch on the Act, because that'll, if you like, fast forward, we'll go backwards and forwards a lot.
Okay, sure. The Irish Sign Language Act became officially legally recognized in December 2007, 17.
17.
And 17. And the deaf community will tell you it was the best Christmas gift they ever had, because President Higgins signed it into law on December 24th, 2017. So it was a big, huge celebration. And I remember at that time having this excited feeling that finally the family's language has been recognized. But it was also tinged with sadness because the parents have gone. They didn't get to see it, but their language lives on with me. I'm an interpreter. My sister Veronica is an interpreter. My brother Willie is an interpreter. So professionally, the language still lives within us. But I've got 3 other brothers as well. I should say that I'm the eldest of 6, 4 brothers, 1 sister. When I'm talking about the generations of family, I should have included them too, shouldn't I? Siblings. I have siblings. 4 brothers, 1 sister. We all sign, but 3 of us have taken it a step further and worked with it professionally. Yeah.
So from 2017, it took then another 3 years for that legislation to be enacted.
Yeah, yeah, to be implemented by public bodies. It's a work in progress.
We'll come back to that, because what I'd love to do is really go right back,
okay,
to family life.
Okay.
Because I suppose one question I you know, when you grow up as kids, you know your family, and you probably, I'm guessing, it was like living between 2 worlds, that you spoke with Veronica.
Yeah. Okay. So the family dynamic.
Take me through all of that, because yeah.
Try and picture it. Okay. The eldest of 6, deaf parents. My father's brother was also deaf. He had a deaf wife. They had 5 deaf children. So my father and my uncle were very close. They went to school together. They came home together. They were dating a year of each other, got married within a year of each other, had children within a year of each other, and they continued to work together until my father passed away. So they were very, very tight as a family, but they had their own 3 hearing brothers. But my father and my uncle went to the deaf school in Cabra. So there was 2 deaf schools, one for boys, one for girls. And my father and his brother went to, but 3 generations of the deaf boys in our family went to St. Joseph's School for the Deaf. There was 2 generations of girls in the family. They went to the girls' deaf school in Cabra. So when we were growing up, it always, now people will question this about whether or not it really happened. This is my memory. I thought that because there's so many people in the family that we needed to have 2 houses. No one had said to me, Then down the road are your uncle, your aunt, and your cousins. I had thought we had two sets of parents and we needed two houses because all 11 kids couldn't fit into one house because we would go from one house to the other. It was interchangeable. Yeah. Simple things like if I asked my mom and dad for money and they said, no, I just went to my aunt and my uncle to get a bit of money to buy some sweets. It was a blended, for me, it was a blended family. Yes, it was not my immediate family, but it just felt like we were one big, very happy family. And one of the things that I found out was very different as an adult when I was growing up is that our neighbours were able to do what's called the two-handed finger spelling. Irish style languages, one hand. BSL was two-handed. So all of my neighbours were able to do the two-handed finger spelling. And it wasn't just to say, spell out, hello, how are you, thumbs up. It was full-blown conversations, like finger spelling every single word. And there was one neighbour that would finger spell it. I need the two interpreters to watch this. So finger spell, whatever. And then the hand would go down. That meant full stop. But that was their style of doing it. Yeah. Then another one, I think it was belonged to my uncle's friends. Do you know the old Irish flat caps that you used to have, right? So they would have their conversation. So the flat cap would be here at the front. When they finished the sentence, they would push it to the side to say, your turn, and then back to the front again. So it was a turn-taking exercise that they would do with the flat cap. But my neighbours would always tell my parents if we ended up in the house at 1 o'clock in the morning because our gate used to squeak. And they would wake us up in the morning saying, 1 o'clock in the morning? What are you doing? Oh, no. So the neighbours, we never had to interpret for the neighbours because they all communicated with each other. They were literally the women at the window. And one of the things that I always think is funny is that my mother would be upstairs in the window, signing across to the neighbour across the road, and they would have their own conversations. As children, we did not know the two-handed finger spelling. And if we asked them, what are you talking about? Mind your own business. So never knew the two-handed finger spelling. Just accepted it, or that's how adults do it. And then we just signed different. That's it. Then I went to England. I know I'm going off track here, but I went to England and I ended up learning BSL. And one of the first things I learned was finger spelling. And I remember coming back the first year, catching bits of their conversation, but they had such style and fluidity and rhythm. And it was just like they were catching all of it. And I'm kind of catching bits here and there, but not quite really getting it. Came back the second year, a little bit better. The third year, I sat there and I just went, will I ever get it? And I sat there and I just looked and went, oh, I know what they're saying. In a heartbeat, interrupted the conversation. You just said blah, blah, blah. The two of them looked at me and went into the kitchen and said, mind your own business.
Can I just ask you, Catherine, as well, just for the benefit of, as I say, people like me, a lot of people think that interpreting is translating.
That's a common issue between spoken languages and signed languages. I think that's actually another conversation to have, because in order to do it justice, you would have to give it a bigger description than I could give to you, but they are very different.
Little one.
Very briefly, interpreting is live. It can either be simultaneous or it can be consecutive. Right now, we're doing simultaneous interpreting. So it's live, on the spot, as it is. With translation, it is the written word, and you work on your own. Like, let's say an article, a book. You know, many of the books that we read now have been translated by somebody, but it requires somebody that has got an in-depth knowledge of the translation process and how to make sure that because it's a permanent document, a lot more work goes into translation. I'm not saying that there's not more work goes into interpreting now, because to give Veronica and Cam benefit is that they have no preparation for this job. They don't know where this conversation is going. They have to keep up with our speed. They have to try and second guess what's going to come next. So they've got a really harder job, because they're going to have to do their best in another language.
And
without prep. Without prep.
And at the same time as well, reading and hearing the emotion and the feelings and the body language that goes with that. We will have another session on that, because I think it's really important to know what it means to be an interpreter, what you have to do.
Definitely another conversation.
So I think we'll definitely do that.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
And just a quick thank you as we're going along to Veronica and Cam for doing this. A big thank you really from me for doing this.
And just to do just to add a little bit more, Veronica's using Irish Sign Language, because that's my native language of what I grew up with. Cam is using BSL, because I spent 19 years in the UK, so I would know a lot of people in the UK, and I want to make sure that both of those countries have got access. And I also want to thank Veronica and Cam, because they're doing this on a voluntary basis.
Yeah.
You know, so my thanks to them as well. Yeah.
Take me back again to family life, because what's really interesting for me is that, you know, we spoke earlier about generally people who are deaf or have deaf members of their family create their own, if you like, families within families or within communities. And you had two families, so it was like a bigger community within a community as well. When did you start to realize, you said that because you didn't know any different, that was the way you switched between households, you switched between
siblings, cousins,
and talking and signing?
At home, it was actually very clear. You signed at home. That's it. To not sign at home was bad manners. It was bad manners. That's simple. But you could talk when you went out, because that's fine, because they're hearing. But I never understood the deaf hearing dynamic until I went to school. Like I said, all of the neighbours were able to sign. When we went to my mother's family in Donegal, they had their own way of communicating. And it wasn't signing, it was just they picked up their way of communicating. As we got older, we did end up interpreting with them, but it was more of a family chit-chat kind of thing. But I've gone off the point. Come back and remind me.
So come back to, I suppose, as you began to, if you like, grow up and then go to school.
Okay, so schools.
Yeah.
Okay, so grew up in a deaf family. All of the neighbours could talk to each other. It wasn't until I went to school that I started feeling different. I couldn't put a word on it. I couldn't put a feeling on it, but it was different. And one of the stories that my parents told me is that they had to tell me several times, don't sign when you're at school. You have to talk. And I was just going, I don't know. It was strict. Don't hug people. But I have since found out from other Codas in other countries that would be the same thing that would happen to them as well. And that's why I have enjoyed the Coda experience, because it's not just me that had that experience. It was all these other Codas, and it didn't matter what country, what language, what culture. It was the same experience of having deaf parents and how you interacted with the world that was different. You know, things like being called a dummy because your parents are deaf, being told that what's the point in you learning the piano because your parents are deaf and dumb. You know, so there was all of those differences being pointed out to us. And I was chronically shy growing up, chronically shy, always quiet. I was chatty with my family and their friends because, bearing in mind, there was my mum, my dad, aunt, uncle, the cousins, but they would have all of their own individual deaf friends. And we would have deaf people coming from all over Ireland, coming to my uncle's house first, then to our house. So it was very much a deaf household, and sign language was the norm. You just went out. When you went out, you spoke. But then different things happened in the outside world that wasn't understood by me until I met with other coders.
As you say, the experiences for coders, you might say, is universal. And going to the conference made you realize you weren't alone in all of that.
Yeah.
And
coders travel hundreds and thousands of miles just to have that experience. We have an organization, but it's a virtual organization. We don't have a physical building that we can go to and have a conversation about. We don't have, our only space is when we go to an annual conference or an annual retreat or an international conference. So those times and those spaces are very, very precious. For me, I'm not speaking on behalf of all coders because each one will have a different experience. But for me, it's my lifeline. I don't always go, but it's my lifeline. It's knowing that it's there, and it's knowing that I can reach out and I can ask questions, or I can get things clarified. Was it like this for you? Or what about this? It's the safe place to go to do that.
And I mean, you know the way I prefer to work as well. That really is in person, in the room. Everything happens in the room. It's the energy you pick up. It's the connection you make. It's the warmth.
Yeah.
Much as I want to, I can't really give you a big hug. But I know you'll feel that. But I just want to ask you, there wasn't really in-depth research done until Paul Preston. Is that right?
It first started with Millie Brother. She was she has already told you her story, so I won't duplicate that. But yes, the first printed document that was out there in the world was Paul Preston, and that was called Mother, Father, Deaf. Now, that is decades old now, but it's still relevant.
Yeah.
But what needs to happen is that there needs to be more co-delayed research done. For me, I think when it's done by us, we know and understand, and we can navigate the research in a more culturally sensitive manner. Because again, I'm not representing all coders. And one thing that I will say is that some of us will call ourselves Coda, some of us will call ourselves Hearing Me, Mother, Father, Deaf. Others will say, yes, I have deaf parents. Yes, I use sign language. So there's a spectrum that exists with our population as well. Not everybody feels that identity with Coda, but they might identify along the Coda spectrum. Yeah. And then there will be others that don't identify at all. They don't say that they have deaf parents. They don't talk about having sign language. And that is because of the negative experience that they would have experienced when they were growing up. So there can be that separation as well. So I just needed to make that clear, is that there is a spectrum of us out there. So I'm only talking about one aspect of it. But if you talk to others, they will have their perspective on it. And that's to be respected as well. Like there's some that coders that don't sign. And that is because their parents were told, don't sign to your children. Whereas my parents, my family were, it's all about sign language, respect the language. They didn't say respect the language. It was like, you're signing in this house. If you don't, you're rude. Yeah.
Now, I would just like to welcome John, who's appeared on our screens. John, am I right in saying that you have tuned in from LA?
Yes, I'm so sorry about the misunderstanding of the time. My apologies.
Not to worry at all. This is lovely because we now have for this part of the session ASL in the room. So I'd like to thank you for being here as well. What we've been doing is really, I suppose, going backwards and forwards through Catherine's early life, her experiences, and this conversation can go anywhere, absolutely anywhere. So what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind, John, thank you for being here, joining Cam and Veronica as well, is just, in case there's background noise, just mute you and carry on the conversation with Catherine.
Very well.
So Catherine, 3 people that you've known for a long time, who you've met through the Coda world.
Yeah.
You're somebody who has traveled extensively. And one thing I'd like to, I suppose, touch on is the whole, I suppose, issue of family. As I said, this conversation can go anywhere. But in the early years, it was much more difficult to travel. And you went to the conference, you then started to go to other things where, you know, if you like, your experience widened, your ability to sign in different sign languages.
This is what my head, this is what the inside of my head looks like, because I sign in ISL, BSL, and international sign. So there are days when, during COVID, I'll give you one example. During COVID, I did ISL in the morning, BSL in the afternoon, and international sign in the evening. And I woke up the next day and it was like the biggest hangover you ever had without a drink. And I went, nah, Dawn, I'm going to have to reduce the language stuff going on in my head. So I now only use ISL and BSL. But the reason why I've got the 3 of them is, like I said, because I have traveled and I've met different people in different places, and I want to respect and honor all of those people that I've met in the different countries. You know, having BSL, having that opportunity to travel to Finland, because it was the London Deaf community that said, come with us, you know. So, and then when it was America, it was Coda saying, come to America, there's a retreat there, which I did do after my father died. And I felt lost, you know. And the Coda said, you know, well, why don't you go to the retreat in America after my father died? And I have to say that was the best healing for me, because I was with other Codas who understood the significance of losing not just a parent, but a deaf parent, and the experiences that go with that. Yeah. So that's why John's here, because of the American side of it. Yeah. So, and John's here on a voluntary basis as well. So thank you. And on a different time zone. Thank you.
And it just really brings home to me how language, a common language, is the key. You know, we have our own, if you like, in the main, our immediate families, our blood families. We have the family that we create with, as if you like, friends, through friendships that develop over decades. But there's also the Coda global family. And this really demonstrates to me so clearly how deep those friendships are, how rich they are, how much they add to all of your lives can be exhausting. And I know, because many times you and I have had a message very, very late at night saying, I'm in bed, can't talk, gone. And I really get it now.
Yeah.
But it is a tremendous community. And I suppose in the future, Catherine, that's picking up, listening to, I suppose, my early recording with Joanne. I'd like to pick up again with the community that I've started to tiptoe in.
Yeah.
Because it's only by people like me learning, making mistakes, I can learn how to do it better. We can learn how to do it better. And I have to say, every interpreter, every Coda interpreter, particularly, that I've met, has taught me so much. And there is a richness there that I think, as human beings, from a hearing world, we are losing out.
I think so.
And it's time. It's time for lots of things in Ireland. Let's face it, we live in Ireland. We're an island community. We can be a little bit, what's a diplomatic word, if there is one? The word escapes me, so that's probably just as well, because it could have been a little bit parochial, and I'll say it. We can be a little bit parochial. That's a difficult word, I'm sure, to sign. But, you know, for a small country, we pack a big punch overseas. For a small country, overall, we're a wealthy country. There is money here. How it's being spent by our government is another big conversation. But the steps that can be taken to be more inclusive, I think, are relatively straightforward. And I think it comes back to those early days in school, when somebody who is growing up within a particular environment is suddenly thrown out there. How do you cope with it? How do you understand? How do you understand you're the same as other kids, but you're totally different? How do you learn how to navigate that? Whereas if another kid came up to you and just said who they were, or even when you handed something, to say thank you.
Oh, you like, as you're talking, there's several things that come to mind. But I've spoken about the Irish deaf community, the British deaf community, the American Coda community, but I need to put in there the New Zealand deaf community as well.
Yeah.
Now, they can follow BSL, but they will have their own, you know, New Zealand Sign Language is its own language, but there's a link between British Sign Language. So I want to acknowledge them as well, just in case they see this, because working with the Māori deaf community taught me a lot as well. But again, another time, another place. But just trying to pick up on some of the things that you were saying. In having deaf parents, we are automatically different, because the language and the culture at home is different. How it's perceived has been both positive and negative. But like all human traits, we tend to focus on the negative. And, you know, there was a program that was done by OTE. I don't know if you've seen it, Mother, Father, Day, where I speak to that, you know, we're always a problem. Everything was a problem. And when you're having to focus your attention on resolving problems, people are missing out on, look at how fascinating this is. Has one person from Tralee, I was able to go to England, I was able to go to New Zealand, I could go to America and learn other languages. That is being missed out on. The benefit of having deaf parents, I would not be doing all of this if it had not been for deaf parents, if it had not been for the deaf community that gave me that learning of. Now, we talked about Ireland being pro-club, we didn't travel much. We did as a family. My father, my uncle would always take us to deaf clubs around the country, weddings, funerals, baptisms, you know, because there's so many deaf in the family. We were always traveling and we were always meeting other deaf people. So that was ingrained in me from a very early young age. And I think that's why I went off traveling. But I just traveled to other countries, yeah. But the more I met deaf people, the more I met Codas. So the two of them come hand in hand. You know, we're not two separate species. You know, you can't have one without the other. And I think language-wise, cultural-wise, our, and I'm talking about the collective here because they're all three interpreters, our satisfaction when we work as interpreters is that we've got that background knowledge. We had it growing up. We catch the nuances, and that pleasure and excitement of being able to relay that to somebody else. They get it, they understand it, they get interested, and they want to get involved. And then you know the job is done. I'll leave it at that for now. Ask me another one.
I suppose I'd like to come back to parents,
Yeah.
because that's where the journey starts. I mean, as, if you like, grown up coders now, you're adept at moving between the two worlds. There is no division in your lives. But for your parents, I suppose, in the way that they guided you to navigate the world and encouraged you to engage, and as people will clearly be able to see, we're not youngsters anymore.
I know. Well, I just want to point
Still
out
young
that
at heart.
I'll just point out that I'm 7 years older than my sister, so I just need to make that clear.
But what advice? Let's talk about young parents of today,
Yeah.
because I think that there's wisdom that is carried through the generations and through the past conversations that we've had before we came to this, and you and I talking today. There's been wisdom passed down. There's been growth and understanding and research, and it's the intergenerational learning is immense. And now I think it's at a point where, with the growth of technology and so many other things, there is so much more that can be done with greater capability and potential. So what would you advise young parents?
Oh, small question, big answer. Okay.
You know me.
I would say, no matter what others have to say, give your child your language, because there is joy to be had, there's pleasure to be had. You can travel anywhere with sign language. The community, the deaf community, you can have connections with the deaf community worldwide. If your children are hearing and they learn to sign, they can also have the Coda network. It is very challenging for parents of any generation, including the young ones, that they allow themselves that right, irregardless of what the professionals have to say or what's around them. Give your child that language, because I know that I would be a very different person if my parents did not sign to me. I would have lost out on so much. Communication and language is all about attachment. So if you're looking at parents with a child, but they're already dealing with their own experiences of growing up being told not to sign, that they were not able to do this, they were not able to do that, then they become parents and they're still being told what they can and cannot do. So in the midst of all of that, it takes great strength for parents to believe in their own conviction and saying, I am going to sign to my child. I am going to show them manners. I am going to show them what's right and wrong. I am, but do it in their own language, because that is their right. the other thing is that as children, we have a language, we have a culture, we have history. I carry my parents' legacy, I carry my family's legacy. Passing it on is essential. But how can you pass on something if you don't pass on the language first? Because then how are you going to communicate? How are you going to understand feelings? How are you going to negotiate difficult scenarios? Anything that a parent does is by their mother tongue. I think that people just should not listen to anybody and just saying my child is going to sing, irregardless if their child is hearing or deaf, because it's about family connections. It's about the history. It's about, you know, having that relationship for the rest of your life. It's very simple, sign.
And just to, you know, we're talking in Ireland.
Yeah.
Can you just give us some broad, paint a picture of the size of the deaf community here? How many people roughly speak sign language? Sorry, can sign?
I know that it's going to be only rough estimates because,
rough.
yeah.
But it'll give it a context as to
Okay.
why we need sign language to be taught in schools,
Yeah.
and for more sign language interpreters.
It's been estimated that there are 5,000 members of the deaf community, but it's also estimated that there's about 40,000 people that use ISL. So that would be people like myself that grew up with Irish Sign Language, and then it would be other family members, neighbours, co-workers, all of them having varying capabilities of being able to sign. So estimate 40,000. Now, with the introduction of the ISL Act, it's going to give people that feeling of my language is the same as English, it's the same as Irish, it's got the same equivalence legally. And I think not so much my generation, because yes, as you pointed out, on the older side, I think for the younger generations, for them to know that their family language is legally recognized. And I think there will be a shift towards having that pride rather than embarrassment. They will have that, you know, if sign language is taught in school, they're going to be seen as the cool kids because they're the ones that already sign at home, rather than going, oh, your parents are deaf, oh, you know, let that be a thing of the past. So I think in future generations, I think there's a lot more going for deaf parents and for hearing children of deaf parents. You know, I think there will be change, but I think it's through the passage of time. But I do think that we, as the elder Codas, including the ones that are working away, I do think that we have some responsibility in putting ourselves out there, be loud, be proud, and saying, yes, I have deaf parents, and it's a cool thing to have, and the language is cool, and you can do so many things with this as well. It's not just to be able to communicate with your persons, but other parts of the world that other people don't see, but we have access to.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Fully agree with you. And it's just being able to participate at so many levels, whether it's being more involved. We were talking earlier before we started, and Cam was talking about civic involvement. There are so many things, and you know, every country, and it's not just Ireland, but we have different issues going on with all different things within. We need total participation.
Yeah. And for me, as a starting point, very simple. In our world and in our professional world, there's only two groupings: deaf, hearing. For me, what I want to see change in that spectrum is that it's deaf, coda, hearing, because we're here, we exist, and we're in between the two. So as a starting point in terms of civic involvement, my thing would be to ask our community and our profession please include us in, because we need to be at the table. Times have changed. It's no longer black and white. It's no longer deaf and hearing, because our world is all about intersectionalities. It's about the different identities that we have. You know, when I go to Coda conferences, it's all about not just having deaf parents, but the other intersectionalities that they have that adds a richness to the conversation. And I would like to see that as a starting point. It doesn't cost anything. You just need to say it. So then we know that we are being seen, we are being heard, and that our experiences is just as worthy as anybody else. When it was made mention of the civic engagement, I would agree with that. And the conversations that you've started is with what I would call the elderly, the more senior population of Codas. I think there's far more fascinating conversations to be had with the younger Codas, seeing how they talk about being a Coda, how they see it as a political issue, they see it as civic involvement, they see it as, you know, the right to be, this is my intersectionality, I own it, I'm proud. Their conversation is going to be substantially different to mine. That's going to be different from my elders, you know, my elder Codas, to me, to the next generation and the younger generation. What I have to say is alien to them. Like, that is just so ancient. What are you talking about? But it's still my reality. But then you look at, you know, the younger generations and how they present themselves to the world, how they present their parents, their language, their culture. I think we can actually learn from the younger generation as well. The vocabulary that they use, the language that they use, the sense of ownership that they have is fascinating. And I learn from them. They give me the confidence to speak out, to be fair.
But I think there's an important point there, Catherine, that it is the intergenerational wisdom that will inform how they in turn can escalate involvement.
There needs to be a timeline. Like, every population has history. The Coda history is hidden. It's not being documented by Codas as much as other communities have done. So I think Codas now need to be a little bit more out there. We need to be leading on conversations about being a Coda. We need to be leading the conversation about, you know, our right to exist between both worlds, but to have us at the table, to have us in the conversation. It's not just deaf and hearing anymore. I think those days are well gone, because if you look at society at large, we've got all kinds of spectrum, you know, the LGBTQI plus, there's a spectrum within that, there's a spectrum within gender, there's a spectrum within race, you know, there's all of that. We need to own that conversation as well. And we need to change the lens on how deaf parents are seen and how we as Codas are seen, because there's a lot of myths and misinformation out there. And I think this conversation is only a start, but I'm hoping that it will inspire the younger generation Codas to come out and have their conversation. But there's a saying in the deaf world, you know, nothing about us without us. I think that saying should hold true for Codas as well. Nothing about us without us. You know, if you're going to talk about us, involve us. If you're going to make decisions on our behalf, let us know. Because right now, let's say, as an example, within the interpreting profession, you're either deaf or you're hearing. And I just go, I want to put a little X in the middle of the two of them. You know, just to show that it's not just deaf and hearing anymore. We've got spectrums out there. Introduce it into the conversation now, like you're trying to do.
Exactly.
And I'm just very conscious of time. And I'm very conscious that the interpreters have been working without a break. And I don't want to be seen as an interpreter who is now letting the interpreters work without a break and without introducing good practice. So I need to say that in my defense. I've let them work without a break. So maybe this could be a conversation we could have another time, or
I would like that very much. But what that actually is a note that I want to finish on, because it is bringing the wisdom forward.
Yeah.
I think younger generations have a sense of can do, will do, and nothing stands in their way, so that they know what they want and how to get it.
Yeah.
What is missing is why it matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where the inherited wisdom and the intergenerational work comes
Yeah.
in, because then with that depth of understanding, everything that comes from here on in is ever richer.
Yeah. And I think young coders deserve to see other people like them out there. I know
Yes.
that there's the Coda movie, but that's only one teeny tiny fraction of the Coda world. It's only a teeny tiny little thing. But I think coders deserve to see role models on TV. They deserve to see Coda books. They deserve to see and to give the deaf parents the pride. That's my child. They use my language, my culture, and it's all good. So it's for deaf parents and for coders. So you can't separate the two. I can go on and on and on and waffle, and the interpreter say, you said you were going to finish a couple of minutes ago.
Well, we will do, and we will wrap up now. Catherine, thank you. What this has done is reignited the journey that we started on. It's just that COVID got in the way and everything else in the world. And I think it's coming back. I always say when the time is right, once you start the conversation, if you don't close that conversation, it grows. So I will say thank you very much, Catherine White. Veronica White, thank you. Cam Diaz, and have I got your pronunciation right, Cam? Cam, thank you for BSL interpreting. And John, thank you. You've added immense richness to my world. Thank you all, and good evening to you.
And thank you, Janie, as well, for starting the conversation. Thank you for showcasing Codas just as they are, without any script, without anything else. So thank you for creating that space. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.